Well, good morning everybody. Thank you for coming. We meet today in a city known for its strength, in a country with citizens known for their courage. And we've never needed more courage and resilience with the crisis facing Australia. Today I want to just run through a few things which I think the public should be aware of and they're right to know. But before I do, I want to pay homage to Craig Kelly and the excellent leadership he's provided the nation. He's been the primary person responsible for what it is today, 46,000 Australians joining our party. And it's pretty clear that within the next month we'll have the largest membership of any political party in Australia. And certainly in my 50-year experience in politics as a former director of the Nationals, the Liberal Party, and a life member of those parties, I've never seen or experienced so many people join a party so quickly. I think when we set up the LNP, the most people that joined the party was 685 in one day. When Craig Kelly announced that he was our leader in the party, our membership went up by 5,000 people in 24 hours. So that's an indication that people in Australia are not happy. They're not happy with their politicians. They're not happy with what they're doing. But today I want to talk about John Skerritt from the TGA. I want to respond to an article that was written by David Crowe in the Sydney Morning Herald on Friday, where he said that the TGA was considering legal action or criminal charges against our leader, Craig Kelly, for a tweet that he put out. And that tweet was authorised, he authorised the tweet on behalf of the United Australia Party, and as chairman of that party, I'm here now to explain to you what it was. First of all, what was tweeted was a copy of the TGA's own report, which I think has all been circulated here. You've got a copy of it. It was a government report. So it's an extraordinary situation where you've got a member of the Australian House of Representatives being attacked for doing nothing more than circulating a government report. First of all, the United Australia Party welcomes any legal action against Mr Kelly. We look forward to it as an opportunity when John Skerritt himself can be subpoenaed, can be asked the questions about the 483 Australians that have died after having the vaccine, can be asked to say for the court and for the Australian people what were their causes of death and what did the TGA do to investigate that and why is it justified to continue the rollout. Secondly, we can ask Mr Skerritt on oath about the 46,000 adverse reports that his office has received, about what he's done about it. And thirdly, we can raise the question of how he's threatened media owners with the cancellation of advertising if journalists publish anything to do with a contrary view of the government, and his attack on the freedom of speech. There'll also be a great opportunity to subpoena Greg Hunt, to bring him before the courts so he can explain his actions as a minister. Of course, Craig Kelly has nothing to fear from circulating an Australian government report. He has nothing to fear or be intimidated about the resources. He has the resources to defend himself. He has the resources to expose what's happening with the TGA. And a serious question's got to be asked with Mr Skerritt, who's responsible for regulating drugs in this country. When we see him in a white coat on television promoting vaccines, is a serious conflict of interest between a regulator promoting a company's product. So we look forward to the United Australia Party with John Skerritt being true to his word, commencing a legal proceeding to allow the real relevant evidence to be brought before the court. I would also say that on behalf of the party, we'll be standing candidates in 151 seats in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And you've probably seen overnight how Wayne Swan, the President of the Labor Party, has started to tremble and fear that he's got no chance in government. Because there is a great coalition in this country at the moment between the Liberal and Labor parties. They represent the real coalition to deny people their chance in an election time. And he knows that Labor will not become the next government of this country. And we're targeting those seats and we expect to be very successful. Our initial polling indicates that. The overwhelming public support that we've had in membership indicates that. And we'll be moving on in the next 2 to 3 weeks to make a number of serious policy announcements about other areas of the economy besides just concentrating on lockdowns and vaccination policy. We have to think about how we're going to get the economy moving and how we're going to bring Australia back to where it should be, to full employment and freedom across our borders. So maybe with that you may have some questions you want to ask me. I'm more than happy to answer them.
Clive, can you see that by standing here today, by, again, an elected member of Parliament, Craig Kelly, can you see how people feel that what you're doing is a campaign of fear?
Sorry?
Well, tell people...
Well, I missed the last two words.
We've talked about campaign of fear.
Yeah. Well, it's not a campaign.
But I mean, you're here, look at all this information that you've passed on to us here about adverse reactions to
it's very serious. It's very serious. Yeah.
People want their freedoms back. The government's telling us that to get our freedoms back is to get the jab.
Yeah, and we're saying very clearly that if you want to get the jab or you don't want to get the jab is a matter of personal choice, right? But the Helsinki Accord, the Nuremberg Declaration, all say that people are entitled to informed consent. Now, this is an Australian government report published by the Australian government. It's not something that we've come up with. And people are entitled to their full informed consent. And all we're doing really, and all Craig Kelly's doing, is saying true to his oath of office that he'll protect and defend the rights of all Australians. Now, you know, if there are serious side effects by these vaccines, and I would point out these are reports to the TGA by physicians and others about deaths that have taken place following the receipt of the vaccines. And that's all they are, and that's all the report says. But people are entitled to know what the truth is, because the media won't tell them. And the media has been threatened with the loss of their advertising contracts. John Skerritt wrote to I think we put some ads on one of the local radio stations you saw a few weeks back. He wrote a letter to them telling them that the TGA wouldn't do it, and then immediately gave them a very lucrative advertising contract so that we couldn't get any airtime. And, you know, it's unprecedented in this country where you get the government saying that they will threaten the freedom of the press, the rights of people to know, by withholding government money for their advertising. And you get media owners who may need that money, instructing their journalists that they can't run articles, they can't be critical of the government, that there isn't any fair reporting anymore in this country. So what do you do? Craig Kelly, as an elected member of the people, has sent a tweet enclosing nothing more, no comments, but our government report, so people can have informed consent. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's very commendable, and I'll be certainly supporting Mr Kelly with all my resources, for sure, to defend his right to freedom of speech and the rights of all Australians to make an informed choice.
Has John Skerritt, has his lawyers been in touch with you? Have your lawyers been in touch with him, or is it this is all?
No, well, John Skerritt lawyers haven't been in touch with me, or I don't think Mr Kelly, but we've seen the threats that John's made. Right? Certainly, John has written me a letter which I responded to. I think I released that a few weeks ago, but. Yeah, simple facts are that Mr Kelly hasn't broken any law, that freedom of speech, despite the lockdowns, exists in Australia, that a different point of view should be given. And of course, you know, we know from freedom of information and other reasons that there's been no COVID samples in Australia that they've been able to calibrate testing by, that they've relied on overseas studies and overseas things provided by pharmaceutical companies. And more concerning to me personally is the fact that both Pfizer and AstraZeneca would not allow their products to be sold in Australia unless the Australian government gave them a full indemnity that if they killed anyone or maimed them, they wouldn't be responsible, the government would be. So I find that a very disturbing thing, that the government didn't take the view and say, well, if you're confident in your product, you should stand behind it.
Clive, what would you say right now to the people of Sydney, New South Wales, 1,600 cases, 1,800 cases a day, whatever they're up to at the moment? It's horrible what's going on, and there's people dying in hospital.
Yeah, well,
we've seen people die in hospital. They're not dying of fake disease, they're dying of COVID-19. You're up here today, it's irresponsible.
Well, I don't believe that, you know.
But what would you say to those business owners that can't open their business because
I would say it's terrible.
Their Premier's telling them that the only way out is a double jab, and that's what they've been told.
Yeah, I'd say their Premier's lying to them. I'd say that she's under an IPAC inquiry, that a particular lobbyist in Sydney controls the Liberal Party in Sydney and has told her that the only way she gets out of that inquiry is if she pushes the double jab, and that his clients are AstraZeneca and his clients are Pfizer. That's what I'd say.
That's political. What about the business owner that's been told he can't open his doors until he double jabs?
If you let me answer your question, I'll answer it.
You're just answering with IPAC
that's what
politics.
You asked me.
About people that are trying to open their businesses, people that live in border towns that are told they have to double jab.
Well, if you don't want me to answer the question, you know, I'll answer the question to start with. That's what I'd tell them, and I'd say that what the Premier's telling them is not true, and that policy shouldn't be locked down. Businesses should be open, and the government's using this as an excuse to destroy them, and they know that.
Do you, think do you think that the Premier of New South Wales wants to destroy business?
I do.
Why would she do that?
Because
it's her economy.
Because she, as I tried to explain to you, that she's being directed by a lobbyist in Sydney who's being paid by AstraZeneca and by Pfizer tens of millions of dollars to get these policies through to make sure the vaccine is pushed. That's why. You asked the question, I gave you the answer. And that's my personal knowledge. And I'm happy to make a statement here to police or to anyone if they want to know what's going on. That's all. Well, I'll be doing that, but they'll be named. But not only that, what's more important, as I said, 46,000 people, 20,000 from the western suburbs of Sydney, has decided to join our party. And we do live in a democracy in Australia at the moment. And there is an election coming up. And the government, the federal government, will be held to account. I'll just see if there's anyone else who wants to ask a question.
Yeah, have you been vaccinated yourself?
No.
No, and you won't be vaccinated?
Definitely not, no.
And is the policy of the United Parliament Party to stop the rollout altogether? Is that what you would like to see?
Well, I think in Australia we've got a very good system of approvals normally for vaccines over a 10-year period normally, a 7 to 10-year period. And one of the major requirements is that there is substantial safety data at 2, 3 and 5 years. The other requirement is that there's safety studies for testing in pregnant women and for children. There's been no studies done of any of these vaccines. And what I'm in favour of is protecting that approval system. That's what I'm in favour. I'm saying if a vaccine hasn't gone through those approvals, we shouldn't be willy-nilly putting into the whole population. That's my point of view. But everybody, including members of our party, are entitled to their own opinion.
So people should have the option to get vaccinated?
Well, it's the option. It's freedom of choice in Australia. Well, I don't think there should be any law that requires people not to... I think a medical treatment should be between a patient and his doctor, really. He knows the individual's medical condition. It shouldn't be a blanket cover for anybody. It should be between the doctor. It should be a private thing. The Commonwealth Privacy Act requires medical records to be kept private, and we've long had that tradition in Australia. But suddenly we see directions from the police department in Queensland saying that people must be vaccinated or they lose their jobs, that teachers in New South Wales must be vaccinated or they lose their jobs, that there becomes a condition of employment that you take a medical treatment. Now, back in Nuremberg in 1947, the International Court of Justice said that was wrong. They said that after following the treatments and experimentation that took place in World War II, they said individuals should have the right to decide what goes into their body and what doesn't. Section 51(23)A of the Australian Constitution prohibits coercion in relation to medical practitioners, would stop them from being coerced by any penalty or anything from giving their vaccine. And we see today that there is coercion taking place in our society, and we think it's wrong. And that's why Craig Kelly's got so much support, and that's why there's a big shift coming in the Australian electoral system, and it'll happen at the next election.
But who did Queensland Police say they have to have a jab?
Sorry?
You said Queensland Police have told people don't have a jab.
Well, there's a direction from the Queensland Police Commissioner requiring all officers to have a jab.
And health workers have been told the same.
I understand that. I'm not familiar with that direction. I am with the Queensland Police one. I think it's by the 4th of October for the Queensland Police, or they're not suitable for duty, and I think the nurses are by the end of September.
Unions agree with it.
Well, they do, and that's the sad thing, because we normally have a diversity of decision of opinion in Australia, and the media has always been famous, the Australian media, for many years, reporting two sides of the argument. And there are two sides of this argument, and people should be informed, and people should have the right to know. And we're saying they're not having the right to know, and they're not having the political choice when you get all of our political parties saying the same thing. And there is good reason not to say it. Now, that's one of the reasons that we're doing what we're doing.
What do you think?
I'll just check if anyone... I'm happy to answer you, but I'll just ask if has anyone else got a question they want to ask or not?
Yeah, Clive, lots of Australians are complaining about getting spam text messages from Craig Kelly. Can they expect to get more?
Well, you'll have to ask him, right? But all I can give you some figures from the other side of the argument. 1,378,000 Australians got access to this report from the spam messages and spent time reviewing it and looking at it, and that's a reality. So I think that's the other side of the argument. Those people thought it was important enough for them to be able to download it or for them to be able to go through it. So, there'll always be diversity of opinion. And of course, what Craig Kelly did was completely legal. When I was in Parliament, the government, the opposition, decided that political parties were exempt, that they could send text messages through, and of course the Liberal Party and the Labor Party did that. But they never thought one of the minor parties would have the funds or resources to do that, so they thought it was a great joke. But now they know that other people can follow what their leadership in that area, and that's what we did.
How big is the campaign war chest leading to the next federal election?
Well, yeah, I'm sure it will be the most well-funded campaign of any of the parties contesting the election. I'm sure we'll be having the most campaign workers, and I'm sure we'll be having the most members. That's how it looks at the moment.
And can you reveal any other high-profile candidates you've got in writing?
Well, we will be, but we can't give you all the news in one day. I'd like to give you, but I want to save some news for you for later on, and there is some exciting news coming. That's the big thing. So, with that, I'll thank you all for coming. I hope you've got the press release there, and you've got the TGA report, so you know exactly what was sent. I should just make one comment, and this is the TGA report for the 25th of the 8th. The one that was sent was the week before, right? But the figures are very similar.
So it's about a week difference.
About a week difference. I think there was 438 deaths, and now there's 483 reported deaths, according to the TGA. We have to rely on them for the information. Thanks very much for your time. All the best.